Well, hello everyone. I'm excited to introduce Dr. Angie Martinez today. She is from, she actually went to school at Centauri High School, and I know that we crossed paths in high school playing basketball. I was actually a cheerleader, and I think she played basketball, but I know we had to have seen each other on the court somewhere. And so I will just let her introduce herself and tell us a little bit about where she's from and what she's up to these days.
Yes, so grew up in the San Luis Valley, grew up in Capulín, Colorado, and did go to Centauri and played basketball. I think those are my glory days, basketball days. And then in 1992, left the San Luis Valley and went off on a journey, which I'm still on. I went into the undergrad college at CSU. That's where I studied pre-med, and after graduating CSU, I actually took a year off so that I could make money to apply to medical school, because it takes money to apply. And so I was obviously a typical Valley student, where I was living off of, scholarships and, working jobs, and that's sort of how I survived through college. But had to work extra years so that I can apply to medical school. And so I applied to medical school, got into CU. So I stayed in the States and started my pre-med journey. Don't remember a lot of that. It's amazing how a lot of your life is sort of stuck in a hospital and stuck in the books. But got through pre-med and stayed in Colorado again, did my residency in family medicine through the University of Colorado program through Rose Hospital, and finished up my family medicine residency. Of course, it sounds like it's fast, but it takes a total of like 7 years of just, medical school and residency. So after that, I went and after I finished the training, started my medical career through Denver Health, where I actually did broad spectrum family medicine. I was attending in a faculty where I taught medical students and residents, family medicine. And so I did, hospital work. I delivered babies, did clinical work. So I did that for 3 years, and then really got tired, just because, if you're a female family doc and you speak some Spanish, you really end up working a lot. And especially if you're at Denver Health, you work a lot more. And so I decided to take a different course. And so I transitioned and moved on to Kaiser Permanente and worked in a, HMO modeled program. And through Kaiser, I actually stayed there 11 years, mostly because I was just tired of moving around, probably because I think I get itchy and want to do something different like I've recently done. But I stayed there for at least 11 years. And during that time at Kaiser, I grew a lot in terms of, a career and my understanding of medicine. Did a lot of different programs through Kaiser Permanente, at least as it relates to health disparities. So I worked a lot with the cultural competency groups, trying to train doctors, just some idea about cultural competency care. When you're in medicine, you're such a vulnerable state with patients, where you really do take in a lot of information about where people are from and who they are and what they do, and all their socioeconomic sort of background really does make a difference in their health. So there's really important ways to address that, and when it comes to just traditional conventional medicine, that's always a challenge, just as it is in society these days, to get culturally competent care and avoid, a lot of health disparities, which means that even in the world like a Kaiser Permanente, that if you are a minority, it seems like you would still get less care. Even though you had the same insurance coverage, we were able to see that still exists during the years that I was there. And that's just it's just one of those things in healthcare. And I think it has to do with the fact there's not a lot of, part of it is that there's not a lot of minority doctors who have some concept or some understanding of health as it relates to different people. And so when we think about our health, it actually reflects our culture and who we are. And so if you have, if you don't have a lot of representation of a specific group, whether that be an African American support or any other ethnic background, then you sort of miss out on understanding a lot of the nuances of health and how people are in terms of their habits and their socioeconomic backgrounds, and how people perceive health and how they perceive what's medicine. And, all of those things have to do with who we are. And so there is still a lot of disparity. And so I worked a lot with that for the time that I was at Kaiser, and a lot of other process improvement projects. And I guess, after all that draining, long journey, I found myself in a place where I was burnt out. I physically, was sick and burnt out. And I guess I sort of talk nonchalantly about it, but it was a lot of grinding and grit that it takes to get through something like that. So I think, you sort of have to use a lot of energy in different ways along the way. And so once you get to your mid-career, you start realizing you just don't have a lot of energy left. And that's what burnout is in a profession, is you've actually burnt some health bridges, and you've sort of used up a lot of the tank, and you're not really filling it up as much. And so I did find myself in that situation. And it's very common. When I looked into it at the time, it's actually very common in minority professionals. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that, where we come from, I feel like, and this might be my bias against, or explaining sort of my experience and my burnout, is that you're always working twice as hard. You're always giving twice as much. The burdens that you have to carry, the mountains you have to climb are a lot more. And so by the time you get to the same level as you're getting with your colleagues, you've done twice as much work. And so I felt like, I was generally young for burnout, but, it hits us sooner. So when you look at, especially physicians, a lot of minority physicians burn out young, and I suspect it has to do with that. Our battles are a little bit more.
I'm sorry.
What's that?
I was just going to ask, what is the, do you know the percentage of doctors, of physicians that are minorities? Have you done that research?
I haven't done it recently, quite honestly, but back when I was looking at that data, gosh, it was probably, and it's probably improved somewhat, but it's under 5% when you're thinking about like a Native American group support, African American, Hispanic, Latinos are probably between 5 to 10%, and a little over 10% in the Asian groups. But it's all been, when you look at the demographics of just society, and even just in Colorado and Denver, the Hispanic group, at least in Kaiser Permanente, the clinic I was part of, the Hispanic population was easily 20 to 30%, and I'm the lone, Hispanic Latin doctor that everybody wants to see. So you tend to be high demand because you're doing the work that's special in that way, and so then you set yourself up for the burnout. And I think the other part about it, culturally, I just think socially, we're just raised to be caretakers, or at least it's part of our culture, is that we embrace and care for. And when you do that too much, you burn out, because you can only give so much, and you can't. And if the problem is it's not a career that's easily rewarding, and that you're able to get back that energy that you've just given. So yeah, I found myself sort of in a upside down situation where I didn't have the energy, and so it caught up to me.
Yeah, I can relate as a teacher, just not being able to turn off, your work at night. You don't work a regular 9-to-5 job. You just sort of continue thinking about it at the end of the day and in the middle of the night. People come to your mind, and because you are a caretaker, you think about those kids or those patients that have needs that they've shared with you, and what can you do to help support them, and what kind of resources can you find to help them. And it gets to, it's difficult. So I completely understand, from a different perspective, what you're talking about, and how that can lead to burnout, for sure.
Right. And burnout is, When you look at the definition in the conventional world, or at least as a medical doctor, there's a definition for burnout in professions, especially doctors, and they qualify it in 3 different terms. They call it, it's an energetic burnout, like you're really fatigued. You can't sleep enough to catch up with that fatigue. It's a different type of fatigue that's hard to fill. It's definitely that empty energy. So it's an energetic type of definition. It's an emotional definition of burnout, in that, your brain is different. You become very cynical. And that's actually part of our survival mechanism. Part of burnout is your body's trying to just do the bare minimum to survive. And so when our brain is in that survival in that survival mode, it has more of a judgmental, cynical way about it, because that's sort of how we're supposed to survive. We're not supposed to be optimistic. We're supposed to, pick up a berry and be cynical and judgmental about it and decide, am I going to take my chance to eat this berry, or will I die? And so that's sort of how our mind is set, is that we have to, be very on edge of how we think about things. And so, we're not in that life or death situation, in terms of finding food to survive. But when you're trying to survive in a career, it does become more of a cynical thing. So then you're the grumpy doctor. And then and I was a grumpy doctor. I was trying to be good with my patients, and generally was, but sometimes you just are short fused, and that's part of burnout. And that's a part of the brain. And then the third part is more of a purpose, like you sort of lose alignment and that mojo of really wanting to do what you want to do, because you're so exhausted and tired and frustrated and angry. And all of a sudden you're just like, why am I doing this? Where before you're very ambitious, you wanted to save the world, and now you're just like, you just can't even save yourself and get out of the clinic on time to go home and be with the family. And so those are three distinct factors that relate to everybody in some form of burnout. But when you look at it from a physiologic standpoint, it has to do with, our battery of our life. And so there's different ways you could think about it, but there's the way our body runs is there's parts of our body that needs to be healthy, and there's a part of our cells that make up the batteries, that mitochondria. And mitochondria, back in biology, was that part of the cell that actually made ATP, which is energy. And so burnout truly is mitochondrial dysfunction. If you don't have that battery, you don't have physical energy. That's obvious. But then you do need that part of the battery for your brain. So we need healthy brain to be happy and focused and goal oriented and optimistic. That's actually a healthy brain. It takes a healthy brain to do that. And a healthy brain needs a lot of mitochondria and a lot of ATP. So if you've already burnt that bridge with your battery and you're running on a low battery, then your brain doesn't function very well. But right. Then if the brain doesn't function very well, then we don't get to that upper part of our brain, which is that, spiritual part, or that divine part, which really is where we find our purpose and the reason why we even live. And so if you can't make, the physical energy and the emotional energy, you for sure can't get to that part of your brain. And so those all are just the layers of a physiologic issue, which is, a battery that's just running low. And so I didn't appreciate it at that time when I was burnt out. I knew the definition, but now that I've moved on, which is where I am now today in my journey, is after that burnout and after just running fast and burning out in conventional medicine, I actually left conventional medicine and started practicing functional medicine. And it was actually during that burnout that I started looking for other answers, looking outside, stepping out of the box, stepping out of all my training of like, medicine is only this. And the reason why I did is because it wasn't that for me. I realized as I was taking care of patients, I would take care of them conventionally, but then I'd pull in a lot of, some of the background knowledge that I had from growing up of, people using remedios, people using different types of supplements and vitamins. And I understood because I sort of grew up that way, and I knew why they were doing it, and I was okay with it. So they loved that I was okay with it, and I incorporated it if it was useful. And so I had already had my toes in that. And I think that's just part of who I am, how I was raised in terms of what the whole health and wellness is about. And I maintained that cultural connection to that. But then when I found myself sick, burnt out, and I had other physical symptoms related to that, but it took I went a little bit through the conventional world and realized this isn't who I am, and this isn't what my health is. So then I started looking into functional medicine, which incorporates supplements and vitamins, remedios, botanicals, all those things that are actually very holistic in the healing. And so I studied that for 5-6 years while I was in the conventional world. I fixed myself. I fixed my own battery, through something that was more aligned with who I was and how I was raised. I was able to find, what true health was for me. And so I just embraced that and grew with that. And then, a year and a half ago, just said, I'm already outgrown this conventional knowledge. I don't feel like it's really benefiting a lot of, people. And so I just left to do functional medicine where I can actually incorporate all this. I still use conventional knowledge. I just use the added information from the functional world to just help people along their journeys in life. So it becomes more of I'm more of an advocate of overall optimal health, as opposed to just chasing people's diseases and managing it with a prescription. And this is more prevention. This is more involved. This is more goal-oriented to, optimized health. So it's a little bit more, it's definitely aligned with probably what the universe has really had set out for me. And believe it or not, now my burnout is, long gone. My energy and battery's full, just because I've decided to align myself with what the universe really wanted me to be doing.
Wow, what an incredible journey! My gosh, that's so much experience, and I love how you took what was happening with your own life and did research and made the changes that you had to make to then make a difference in the lives of other people. And so it sounds like what you went through with burnout was sort of that catalyst that said, hey, maybe other people can benefit benefit from the research and the experience that I've had. So that I'm sure that's just been a blessing to so many people. And on that note, I did forget to mention at the beginning of this that we were introduced to each other through Angelina Milan, just a very dear friend of mine. And so she knew that I was doing these interviews and thought that you'd be, a perfect person to have interviewed. And I think she was right. From the conversations that we've had, I think that your work and what you have to offer people is amazing. So tell me a little bit more about some of the connections that you made with people, and so it sort of goes beyond just, like you said, masking a symptom with a prescription, but you sort of go deeper, and you talked about prevention, but you go deeper, like to find actually the root cause of what's causing the symptom, to try to make a difference in that area.
Yeah, it's a different approach and a different paradigm. I think that most people would want that for their health, but our conventional system, when I was trained as a medical doctor, we're not trained to look that deep. And I think that everybody would love that. And I think everybody has that anticipation when they go to the doctor, that's what you're getting. But really, we are trained to recognize symptoms, and then we put, think about how those symptoms are related and try and find a right type of medication for that or right type of procedure for that. We're not ever thinking about, can we reverse that process? That was never been in my training as a conventional doctor. It's always been, once you start the path of illness, we're just going to manage you on that path so you don't get so bad, or you don't, go down the hill so quickly. We're going to sort of manage you along the way so that you can live with your illness. And that was the only premises. That was the paradigm. Whereas now it's really enlightening to feel like, okay, if you're on this process and you're getting this messages, you talk about me getting the message of burnout. Everybody's getting messages. The messages are coming to you one way or another, and Mother Nature has a way of telling you that. And the problem is that we have learned from the conventional world and have actually normalized illness, we say, I got my migraine, it's just my migraine, or it's just that time of the month for me, I just get bad cramps at that time. We've normalized that as being normal, and the truth is that's just a message, something's off. Even if it seems so subtle and it's not like wrecking your life and screwing things up in your world, it's still a message. And so our bodies are constantly giving these messages, and you at some point, when that message becomes loud enough, it becomes painful enough in some way, start listening to it. And either you go to conventional world, or you maybe find somebody like me, where we start saying, okay, if you have this group of messages or symptoms, what the heck is causing that? There's something further upstream. We don't sit there and say, okay, here's what you got going on. I think it's, pre-diabetes. Let's just wait till you become diabetic and manage you then. Our message is, okay, it might be pre-diabetes. Let's go back and figure out, why are you in this boat? And let's start reversing this and getting it to the point that you're not pre-diabetic. We actually reverse the process. And that's sort of what we do. And you can't do that unless you go deeply to the root of the cause. And so those can be across the board, related to the way, our energy works in terms of our mitochondrial health that I mentioned with burnout. It can be your gut health. It can be the way you're cleaning up toxins and not cleaning up toxins. It can be so many little things that you can work with to sort of help improve whatever your symptom is. And so that's our training. Is now as a functional doc, my question is why? Not so much, what's your diagnosis? I mean, I could probably figure that out with my conventional training and say, well, it sounds like you're diabetic, or you're trying to get to be, or you're working your way to diabetes. But my question is why? Because if you can answer that why, then you're going to get to a root cause. And if you can figure out really what it is, then you can make some changes as you need to sort of reverse that, fill in the hole that's been missing in terms of the deficiency or the imbalances or whatever is causing that message to come in the form of a symptom. And in our philosophy or paradigm, if we can limit symptoms, and we feel like you're probably balanced generally, and if you don't have as many symptoms, then cancer isn't necessarily going to sneak up on you if you find balance. Autoimmunity isn't going to sneak up on you if you have balance. You're not going to get a heart attack. You're not going to lose your brain. You're not going to be depressed if you actually have good balance in your body and you're giving your body what it needs. And so that's all we do, is try and find holes and start filling them up at that root cause and make pretty significant differences in people's lives.
Have you done the research to see what a difference it's made, the conventional way versus the functional way?
So in my little small group of patients that I manage, what I do when they come in is I do a questionnaire that gives them a score across the board in their health. And then every time we touch, I have them read that question. And honestly, I can get numbers in being, which I was in conventional medicine. If somebody to me with heartburn, I can give them an antacid, and maybe for a short period of time it helps their heartburn, but then they start coming back with heartburn and more acid, and that medicine isn't working. And so I couldn't fix their heartburn at that point. Now I have people coming with heartburn and without antacids. I'm actually fixing the problem, and you start off with a certain score that's related to their heartburn, and then over time I just show to the patient, hey, when you came in to see me, your score was 75. We're down to 35. And, it just shows just by their symptoms that they've improved. In terms of comparing head to head, I can't think of any study that has been done that way, just because we are so at odds right now. Conventional world is really at odds with functional medicine. It's not that we're at odds with them. I think we just have such different paradigms. We don't stop and rest and relax. And that's the part of the parasympathetic. There's two parts of that can contribute to heartburn. You can have too much sympathetic, crazy stress, and that causes stress hormones that cause acid. So that's like you're under so much stress, you're causing your own acid in your stomach and lead to heartburn. Or there's another aspect to it where you're just too stressed, but not enough of that other part of that other balance, which is parasympathetic. And in our gut lining, in our stomach, there's a vagus nerve that's part of that parasympathetic. A healthy gut really just works in a parasympathetic state. And so if you're too driven, you're not even sitting in a state where your gut needs to be healthy. And so if you don't have that parasympathetic state, you're not supporting gut. And so then you don't even make enough acid, and that causes heartburn. So there's two parts. It could be too much acid or not enough acid. And quite honestly, a lot of people coming to me with their chronic heartburn is the fact they just don't have enough acid. And you need acid to sort of help your gut support and help it function. And so that's sort of contradictory to what we think when we're thinking about heartburn. So as a functional doc, we sort of look at all the layers that affect how that gut should be working. There's some more complex relationships, but they all have to do with the way the stomach is functioning. So we look at all those layers and start just looking at the diet, looking at acid. Do you need it? Maybe somebody just needs the acid and they've been taking antacids when they really needed the acid. We think about, bacteria and how the bacteria can contribute to the heartburn. And we sort of just think about it with the whole terrain of the gut lining and the stomach and everything that's involved with that. And everything from a diet to a mindset to some botanicals and some herbs that help with that lining, and maybe even sometimes giving people acid, and that actually helps with heartburn. So we take all that into consideration.
It sounds like the bottom line that it takes a lot more time to get to know a person,
Absolutely.
to get to know their background, to get to know who they are, what's happening in their life. And it takes time to try these different alternative approaches to see what's making a difference. So it's not like a quick fix, mask the symptom, move on,
Nope.
the type of approach. And in our society where we want everything, immediate satisfaction kind of thing, it's really hard to, I think it's an approach that works so much better because for our overall health, I think it's longer lasting, even though it takes a little bit longer. But I think, again, that quick fix sometimes is a little bit more appealing for some people because it just, takes away the symptom real quick, even though it doesn't, get to the underlying condition. But yeah, so I think it's really interesting that you point all that out, and maybe that's why it's such a two paradigms that are at odds. So yeah,
we are apples and oranges. We aren't at all the same. That's the truth. Even though I encompass both of those worlds, because I was a conventional doc and a functional doc, and I can actually overlap that with my care. The modalities and the paradigms are so different, and the outcomes and the interests and the focus is so different. And so, yeah, that's why we're sort of, at odds with that.
But it sounds like it's worth it, like I said, because your overall health is longer lasting if you take the time to actually pay attention to the messages and and do the systematic approach, to figuring out what's happening to you so that you get to that root. And once you get to the root and pull it out, you can move on. Sounds like. So,
it's one of those. It's one of those background ideas that I think that it sort of goes along with that purpose and what everybody's searching for. So this is a bigger treatment plan, and so it's not for everybody because, as you say, if you want the quick fix, I'm not the doctor for you. But the question is, why do you want the quick fix? There's nothing in life that is ever worthwhile that's quick and easy. And, when it comes to your health, when it comes to your experiences, when it comes to, your career, everything's a journey. And it's not like everybody wants to get to a quick end. And the truth is there's no end. You're just taking on the next chapter and the next journey. And all those troubles and challenges are the messages for your health, or the messages for, where you need to be in a relationship, or the messages of where you need to be in your job. Or maybe you're underperforming, really. A lot of times people are underperforming and the universe wants them to step it up, or they're overgiving in one end. And so all of those balances, so it's not just health, it's a balance of the universe. And it was never meant to be easy, because the truth is health needs a little stress. We need to have a little grit. We need to have a little resilience. And so when we're talking about general health, people who have that grit and resilience are the healthiest. Mother Nature's rules are, you have to adapt, you have to be flexible, you have to, and that all takes, getting into life, getting into it with the dirty parts of life, and doing the fight that you need to fight, whatever that is, so that you can build that resilience and that grit. And I think people have forgotten what the heck that is. We're too easy. We want it too easy, and the truth is, it's reflecting right now in today's world with COVID, and that has everything to do with the problems we're dealing with right now. And people don't realize that that's what it is.
Tell me more about that, about what your thoughts are on COVID right now.
So COVID is, so first of all, people need to understand viruses are weak. Viruses aren't made to take over the world and kill everybody. That's not what viruses are made to do. They're everywhere. We live with trillions of viruses in our bodies at any time. So it's not like it's something new that we're exposed to viruses. It's just that the COVID or the coronavirus was at the right place at the right time in history. And what I mean by that is that on that backbone of saying we have weakened out our health. As a whole, as a species, we have weakened our health. Our immune systems aren't the greatest. We've always wanted cheap, easy ways out of things. We haven't really built up our immune systems. We haven't built up our metabolic resilience. And when about corona, it's floating through the air randomly. You breathe it in, you suck that in through a breath that you take, it makes its entry. And if you don't have a lot of immune resilience and you don't have a lot of factors that help protect you, then you're the one who ends up in trouble. And whether it's something that that you had control over, because there's some people who have cancer and things that you don't have control over, or some things that people do have control over in terms of the lifestyle we've chosen to live. Those are all the risk factors for COVID. And the people who've struggled with COVID and had more complexity with that infection have had some issues at the level of resilience, and that has to do with where your immune system strength is, where your metabolic strengths are. All those root causes are affecting people's ability to fight off COVID, because it shouldn't be a tough virus to beat. The truth about it is, it's the eye opener for us as a whole to say we need to go back and say health shouldn't be easy. We should work hard for it, so that when the next virus comes around, because this isn't the last, when the next virus comes around, it won't be so easy to take over. COVID really had a heyday just because the majority of us weren't ready for it. Some of us had too many high sugars, pre-diabetic, some of us were a little overweight, some of us didn't have very good lung health, whether that was pollution or, there's so many factors, but it comes down to the fact that it was just the right virus at the right time with our resilience being low.
What would you say about the people that didn't have any parent underlying health conditions that have been affected adversely by COVID?
That they didn't have health effects or they didn't have health risks and they still got COVID?
And really suffered tremendously.
So if you looked at the cellular level, they did have risk factors. So there was risk factors. If you looked at, and the thing is that conventional medicine doesn't look there. Conventional medicine is just looking and saying, you're diabetic, you're hypertensive, you have a heart disease. They're only looking at diagnoses. They're not looking at this trend, like you were on your way to diabetes because your fasting sugars are 100 and 105 in the morning. But conventional medicine didn't diagnose you with diabetes, but you still had high sugars. Or you have too much inflammation for some reason. If you look at inflammatory markers, those inflammatory markers are high, but conventional medicine doesn't look at that unless you have an autoimmune disease. And even then, you have to make sure that you have the specific labs that they want to define an autoimmune disease. But there's always this gray zone that's you're working your way, because I had mentioned these things don't sneak up on you. You don't just one day have diabetes or one day have a heart attack or all these risk factors that people have associated with COVID. There were 10 years before that where you were having changes in your body, changes in your biochemistry that were setting you up for your diabetes. And so I will guarantee if you looked back from a functional lens at some of these patients, they were somewhere on this spectrum where they were either working their way to an autoimmune disease, working their way to diabetes, had a BMI greater than 30. All those you can't deny affect your metabolic resilience. And so then you had a risk factor.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And so many of us, because we do live so busy from thing to thing every single day,
Mm-hmm.
We feel fine and we're doing okay,
Mm-hmm.
and then something like this happens and it just, takes us
That's why in
down.
our world, in our world, I have young folks and I'm doing these labs because I'm looking to see where's your sugars right now. You feel healthy. I just want to see where you are on the spectrum, because especially as minorities, we are the risk of COVID. And so when you think about us genetically, so there's the genetic aspect of that. There's always the lifestyle approach, but there's also the genetic risk factors. And so we have to go back to what is more in line with our genes. And so I wasn't necessarily surviving in a conventional world because that wasn't who I was. I sort of went back to what I was taught, with my grandma walking on the riverbank, looking for herbs. And so when I align myself with that, then I find true health and joy. And so it's the same thing with your health too. It's not that people are weak links. It's just starting to align with who you really are. And that does mean doing things differently and not doing what we've been doing, which is the typical American ideal, which is fast foods, easy, all that really doesn't go for our genetic makeup. And so if we know we're the risk factor in terms of a minority, with knowing that, there's COVID out there, what do? You can actually do all these things to boost your metabolism in terms of like fasting and decreasing the carbohydrates and the sugars and getting off of those and exercising a little bit more and being in alignment with who you are in terms of like at least getting rid of that stress of just not being in alignment. If we could do that literally within 2-3 weeks, you can change your metabolic risk factors.
Wow. Interesting.
You don't necessarily have to, drop your sugars. Well, you'll drop sugars just by doing that, but you don't necessarily have to lose 20 pounds and, all these intense goals to just be healthy. You just have to do a few things, and then all of a sudden your risk factors are significantly less, knowing that COVID does like these metabolic risk factors.
And when you talk about alignment too, you're not just talking about your physical health. You're also talking about, you said, going back to your roots and talking about really what your purpose is. You talked a little bit about that, and that's spiritual. So there's another component, it seems like, to your health.
Yeah.
So getting in touch with what you where your purpose is critical, sounds like.
When I take care of a lot of professionals who are minorities, I think suffer a lot of that because we sort of leave the tribe to sort of chase, something better so we can bring back, and there's so much isolation in that. And so when I was in pure conventional knowledge and pure conventional practice, it was such a discrepancy for me. It was just distant. I just couldn't feel aligned with what was really real for me.
Yeah, but when you started working with herbs and remedios, like you talked about, and bringing in the stuff that you learned from your roots, it sounds like it made a huge difference. And I grew up with all of that too. Grandmas had remedios for everything. So
right.
Yeah, and they worked. They totally worked.
No, there's actually conventional knowledge right now that shows that a handful of those, there's reasonings for that and why they work. And so which is why I practice them openly, even because it's not like I'm doing voodoo medicine or quackery type of work. There's evidence that shows why these plant medicines work. And there's something about the energy of something real, the energy of a plant versus there's no energy in a fake pharmaceutical processed drug. There's no life in that. And so I think, going back to ethnically how we think, at least with some background, you want a little bit of life in your medicine, because that does talk to our body. There's Mother Nature set it up so that our body was taking information from the world, from the air we breathe, from the food we eat, but even from the medicines we take. And so that's why plant medicine, I think, is so powerful when you use it in the right way, in the right dose, at the right time.
That's interesting. I can think of a few Osha. I can think of chamizo pardo. My grandfather always had a huge jar of tea in the refrigerator that he drank all the time. And when we had fevers, they would put sliced potatoes and vinegar and some other herbs. And I needed that to put it on our foreheads and our feet, and that took away the fever. So I remember all of those things as well. And so I guess I'm kind of glad that those remedios are being recognized, by functional medicine. So I could talk to you about all this stuff all day. So fascinating to me. But I do want to ask, you talk about this really amazing journey when you went to college and you went to medical school and you were at Kaiser, and then you were at Denver Health, and now you're doing functional medicine. What kind of words of wisdom or advice that you've received along the way would you give to anyone that wanted to follow in your footsteps?
There's so much of a mountain to climb, but I think the advice I'd give is climb the mountain. You do need to climb the mountain, and I think it's not going to be easy. Nobody ever said it was. I actually, in my crazy mind, wanted it to be a little hard, and I think that's just that stubborn Valley way. I'm tough. And I think that really helped me in a way, because there's so many voices along the way that I didn't appreciate. Like I can see now, for example, during the summers I had to work because, I didn't have parents paying for my college. So I'd have to go work, and I'd go clean hotels, so I can, get money ready for the next school year. And I remember running into some, well-to-do person in this high-end hotel. And this guy asked me, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I said, "I'm going to college." "What are you going to college for?" "I'm pre-med." And it was sort of like a chuckle, like, "Yeah, what are you doing, here cleaning toilets and thinking you're going to go to medical school?" Like that wasn't going to happen. But I didn't even recognize that. I didn't hear that. And the reason why I didn't hear it is because I'm so dang stubborn that I wouldn't listen to people. And even if I caught a whiff of that, then my next answer was, watch me. I'm going to do something to prove you wrong. So I think that there's mountains to climb and there's people to prove wrong all the time. And I think that's how you get out at a young age, when you're full of fight. Carry that. Then when you get to my age where you burn out, you stop fighting. You start using higher wisdom. And so, but you have to grow into that, and it takes some fighting spirit to learn that wisdom. You do have to go through tough times, and I think growing up in a small town, the way we grew up, we were sort of given and instilled some value of work, which is you don't see that, and I think you just need to embrace that. Because I thought, as I was leaving and I was going head to head with any of my schooling or even medical school, I thought, you may be smarter than me, but I'm going to always outwork you. I will always outwork you. And that has carried me through. That even if I wasn't smart enough, I outworked everybody. And that actually is what shines the most, quite honestly, for most people, because when you work, you learn. And so you got to get that grit and that callous early on, so that then when you're later in your career, then you start work to that next level of wisdom that you can sort of embrace and grow into. So then that way, somewhere along the line, then you continue to help people find their wisdom or find their grit wherever they are in their lives. But there's some fight and grit that I think is important along the way.
I love that. And that's I can totally relate to, having that tough attitude and to that work ethic, because I learned that work ethic back home from watching all of my family and my friends and the people that were around me, and people that I can look at right now and think about how hard they work, and and I see that in our gente, and I love it. And so I'm so glad you said that, and that is a trait I think that carries you very far.
That's the advantage, is because now these days, there's something that's happening even along my colleagues when I look and see how we deal with stress. And because I was raised in a place to be able to handle stress, I faced stress, I fought stress, I burnt out from stress, but at least I knew what it was. I knew the taste, I knew the flavor, I had callous for it. Come from where we are blessed to have experience. We should see it as that, as being our advantage, and taking and aligning with that, and carrying that as your it's your weapon, really.
Absolutely. I think the only other thing I would add to that is our spirituality, and having that faith. And I think the faith with work ethic and all of the resiliency that you talked about, I think that combination. So
it's the confidence that we have to sort of build up on. But the truth is that once you align yourself to that, you could potentially do whatever the heck you want to do, really, in life.
Absolutely. And I think, when you see the examples of other people that have gone before you, that builds your confidence too. It shows you that if this person can do it, then so can I. And I think that's one of the main powerful messages that I really want to come across through these videos and interviews. And so I'm really so glad that you said that. Yeah. So thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure talking with you. We definitely need to talk more often. So, have a great evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. Take care now.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody, for watching. This has been a La Gente Legacy production and Successful in the SLV Healthcare series. Stay tuned for more.